Welcome to Point Blank, brought to you by Fitz Roofing. I'm Brandon Strange. He is Joel Blank of ESPN Houston's The Press Box. Joel, welcome in. Wanted to talk some Texans with you. Mike Florio had a story this week kind of clarifying some of the details about this five-man committee that Cal McNair has assembled in search of their GM and head coach. He's saying that they are misusing the name or the word committee, that they're really just a group of individual advisors. They're not being paid. They're not meeting together. There definitely doesn't have to be a consensus. It's just all independent recommendations that are being fed to the organization from these five different individuals. Do you expect positive results from this? And I have to ask, if this isn't really a committee, could this just be a smokescreen to buffer the organization's decisions behind more reputable names?
Well, I think there's a lot to this, Brandon, and I think that, somewhere the truth lies in the middle maybe, but I think that if Cal McNair has existing relationships with some of the people on the committee, it makes sense, because the one name that just doesn't make sense is R.C. Buford. I mean, he's the San Antonio Spurs guru along with Greg Popovich, but what Spurs knowledge is going to bring to an NFL franchise trying to find a head coach and general manager, I don't know. But I think that if he has personal relationships with a Jimmy Johnson, a Tony Dungy, Graves, guys that that Andre Johnson knows his stuff, that you would at least get some real football-minded experience on the personnel and coaching side involved. So whether they're paid or not, I want those guys giving me input. If you recall, former coach Dan Reeves was involved the last time that Bob McNair had a coaching search, and he wanted his input. So I think that if you have relationships with these guys, whether they're paid or not, I think it could help this franchise a great deal so they don't make yet another mistake.
I want to get into kind of examining who they might recommend as candidates for these jobs. But before we do that, why don't you give us a word for Fitz Roofing?
We love the people at Fitz Roofing. Look, if you need anything done with your roof, whether it be for your home or your business, maybe it's a leaky roof or you want to put a whole new roof on your facility, all you got to do is call Fitz Roofing, because they have the best ratings in the business, they have the best products in the business, and they have the best customer service. You can see it. It's all right there for you. And the best thing is, if you call them at 832-521-3001, they do a free no obligation inspection today, and they tell you what they can do for free, and then they go back on their way. You want them to come back? They do that, and they do a great job before, during, and after the sale. Fitz Roofing, making a difference one home at a time.
I want to start with the head coaching search. And one of the individuals on this advisory committee is Andre Johnson. He's friends with inside linebackers coach DeMeco Ryans with the 49ers from his time here in Houston. DeMeco works alongside Robert Saleh, who's their defensive coordinator. That's a name we've been hearing as a possible coaching candidate. What do you think about Robert Saleh?
I think there's a guy that brings a lot of energy. I think there's a guy that's had some recent success, obviously, with what he's been able to do with the Niners defense. I think that having a guy like Andre that can give you maybe the inside that not everybody on the outside in the general public or in the football world gets, in terms of what are his practice habits like? How organized is he? Because we know as a head coach, it's more or less being the CEO and then being able to keep everything organized and in a controlled, systematic environment. And that's what the best head coaches are able to do. I think that he brings things to the table. I believe he was with the Texans once before when Kyle Shanahan was here, when under Gary Kubiak they had a lot of guys getting their start in football. And so maybe for some of those reasons, Andre gives you a little bit of the backstory that other people might not have.
All right, one of the other names is Jimmy Johnson, the former Cowboys head coach, not the race car driver, although that would be the most Texans thing ever if they did employ the wrong Jimmy Johnson. But a guy that Jimmy Johnson knows is Alonzo Highsmith, and that's through his ties at Miami and the Cowboys. And Zoe's also probably a guy who knows Andre Johnson from their ties at Miami as well. So Alonzo Highsmith, talk about him as a possible GM candidate.
Alonzo Highsmith happens to be a friend of John Granado's. He's a friend of mine, a Lance Zierlein. A lot of us know Alonzo, and he's paid his dues, but he's worked in systems that could be very, very beneficial to him, whether Jimmy Johnson knows him or not. He's a guy that has lived in Houston, that knows the area, has scouted here, but he got his feet wet for the most part working under Ted Thompson in the and John Dorsey in the Green Bay Packers organization. So he understands how to really develop personnel and talent, how to draft correctly, the way to structure a draft board and your player personnel department, and how you acquire and utilize talent. Those are all key things that need to be brought to the table, as we know, whoever fills the job down on Kirby. And so I think Alonzo Highsmith's a guy that has been always conversed about as being an up-and-coming guy that's going to get his chance at one point or another. He's a guy that could get his chance here. He knows Houston, former Oiler as well, where he could actually put his stamp on an organization. And because of all the different ways he's worked in different capacities in player personnel, he could bring a lot to the table so that this team could start quickly to rebuild from the draft perspective and from a personnel standpoint, a roster and a practice squad that they sorely need to do going forward.
R.C. Buford, a guy you mentioned earlier, is friends with former Falcons GM Thomas Dimitroff, who was recently dismissed. He's considered by many to be the best GM candidate floating out there right now. What do you think of Thomas Dimitroff?
I mean, if you look at what the Falcons have done, yeah, they've had some good talent and they've done some good things with high draft picks, but overall the Falcons didn't get it done when they needed to get it done. But if you look at just his track record, it depends on what you're looking for. If the characteristics are that of talent evaluation, of drafting correctly, then he brings something. And because he's been in the game the most recently of a lot of the guys that you may be considering, that maybe that's a guy that lights a fire under Cal McNair's rear end and says, that's the kind of guy that I want. I think that John Dorsey is another name that's out there. He's a guy that I had said right from the start of the process is a guy that I think under those same terms would be a guy to be considered, simply because whether he knows anybody on the committee or not, he was the key architect of what now is the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Then when he got to the Browns, the one misstep he made was at head coach with Freddie Kitchens. But if he doesn't have to hire the head coach and he's just worried about personnel, most of the guys that have made the Browns a successful franchise, and especially with the success they're having this year, were all basically related to and connected back to John Dorsey. So I think there's another guy that could be in the mix. I don't understand the Buford connection, but if he can get you the insights on a Dimitroff and or helps you to get a true football guy that's right for the position, then it can only help you in terms of making sure you get the right candidate.